Welcome, everyone. We are excited to have you here for our session, Enhancing SEL with 3 Signature Practices for the TLF Summit. Finally, for today's session, you'll need paper and something to write with, so please take a moment to gather those if needed. As you're gathering those materials, we'll talk about the agenda for today's session. Today, we have the opportunity to engage with the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning 3 Signature Practices Playbook. We will be embedding the 3 signature practices into our session. We will begin with an inclusive welcoming, talk briefly about CASEL and SEL, explore the playbook, provide you with some intentional planning time and time to discuss in small groups, and end with an optimistic closure. Our objectives are to introduce CASEL's 3 signature practices playbook as a way to expand embedding SEL into schools with both staff and students. We will provide models and experiential examples of the signature practices to support building content knowledge as a collective group. We will also dedicate time and space for you to create a personal plan with a signature practice using CASEL's planning template.
So we're going to start the session today with an activity that will allow everyone to create connections to our topic by doing some metaphorical thinking. This will also help build relationships and trust within our group by encouraging different perspectives and accepting offbeat or novel ideas. For this activity, you'll need a piece of paper and something to write with. I'm going to start a 2-minute timer, and for 2 minutes, I want you to write down all the ways that you could end this sentence. SEL is like the ocean because. At the end of 2 minutes, everyone will have a chance to share out an ending that they came up with. Ready? Okay, 2 minutes begins now. All right, thank you everyone for your creative ideas and thinking today. And now we're going to take these connection points and dive into the content of our session with a brief review of CASEL's social emotional competencies.
What is social emotional learning? So, the definition of SEL, according to CASEL, or the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, is defined as the process through which all young people and also adults acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes to develop healthy identities, manage emotions, and achieve personal and collective goals. This also helps us to feel and show empathy for others, to establish and maintain healthy relationships, and make responsible and caring decisions. So, in essence, SEL is the components that drive us to be successful in life, right? It helps us to be aware and maintain relationships with others, and participate productively in our society. SEL skills are essential for our students, but also for adults in the room as well. And I'm sure you've seen this CASEL wheel of competencies. Again, just a quick review. CASEL has identified the following 5 competencies or skill sets as the building block for social emotional learning fluency. And they are self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. And you'll notice that these competencies are color coded, and that's by design. So these orange areas or kind of orange spokes focus on internal social emotional skills, right? That inward facing work, internal work. And the green spokes are more outward facing skills, right? So those are the ways that we interact with others. And that yellow spoke, the responsible decision making, is really a combination of both that internal and external set of skills. And we're only going to briefly touch on these are on this wheel and these competencies today. However, we do recommend that if you weren't able to attend our last session, or if you just need a quick review of the content we went over in the fall, that you can click on the link here and access the video recording as well as the resource folder. And that'll help you take a deeper look into the sub skills associated with each of these 5 competencies, and really practical ways to discuss these competencies with your colleagues at your school sites. So, who is CASEL exactly? The Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning is a nonprofit organization that was founded back in 1994. They focus on conducting research on social emotional learning best practices for both children and adults, both within the context of school and outside of the school building. They really work very hard to create and pursue research to create resources and tools accessible to educators and school leaders and policymakers and TLFs like yourself. And we're going to focus on one of the tools that CASEL has created. So we're going to focus on exploring and using the SEL 3 Signature Practices Playbook, which is one of the many resources that CASEL has created to introduce and broaden the use of SEL practices in classrooms, schools, and workplaces in a really practical way. So you can link to the playbook either by clicking on the image on the slide or using the link that has been put in the chat box. And I can see that Angela is already dropping that in there for you. The SEL3 signature practices were developed in response to those commonly heard questions. So, what does SEL look like? And how can we start doing SEL right now? Educators understood and believed in the power of SEL, but we're really looking for clarity about how to demonstrate and observe SEL in action during the school day and beyond. So the SEL 3 signature practices playbook is one tool for fostering a supportive environment and promoting social emotional learning. And CASEL really intentionally and explicitly help to build a habit of practices through which students and adults enhance their own SEL skills. So while this is not an SEL curriculum, these practices are one concrete example of a way to help people understand and practice the goals of an overall systematic SEL implementation plan.
So as you open your document, you're going to notice that the 3 SEL signature practices are broken up into 3 sections or components. We have the welcoming and inclusion activities, engaging strategies, and optimistic closures. These 3 components can be used to guide the structure of the school day, class period, or staff meeting, or any other type of communal gathering for students or adults. We begin with the welcoming inclusion activity. This is an activity, ritual, or routine that builds community amongst participants and connects them to the work ahead. Today, we started our session with an inclusive welcoming that brought all voices, whether aloud or in the chat box, into the space by inviting everybody to engage in a synetics activity. So the opportunity to brainstorm using metaphorical thinking, which connected us to the upcoming SEL content and also allowed us all to be seen and heard as members of this learning community. Our second component is engaging strategies. So as educators, this component might feel like second nature. This is a way to anchor our thinking and our learning by balancing interactive and reflective experiences. So this might include something like a jigsaw, strategic think, pair, and share opportunities, give one, get one, a gallery walk, or any other opportunity that allows an adult or student learner to actively engage in the content. Engaging strategies also include brain breaks and well-rehearsed transition routines. Today, we're going to use a combination of independent think time and small group discussion as part of our engaging strategies. And finally, our last component is optimistic closure. This is an opportunity to close each experience with an intentional way by highlighting individual or shared understanding or forward thinking. This may sound like having each participant share aloud with an ALBO partner or just reflect on some of the following prompts. Am I optimistic about? Something I'll do as a result of this meeting might be, or something I still might have a question about. For me, this component feels like the greatest departure of how I traditionally think about staff meetings. So often, do we get up at the end of a staff meeting and everybody scrambles out with any real sense of closure? This can also be true in the classroom when the bell rings and students rush out at the end of the day, or even in our elementary setting when we pack up, line up, and we leave without ending the day with any type of ritual. And that word ritual is very important here. These three components build a predictable, ritualistic pattern in our day or in our meeting. Our brains love patterns. Patterns provide a sense of safety and security, which is important for children and adults. So take a minute to think about how you could introduce this structure into the work you do with students, or even the work that you do with adults. So this 3 signature practice playbook also aligns with 2 of the APS pillars, social emotional learning, of course, and equity and access. They promote these essential elements of an equitable learning and working environment. So equity of voice. All participants are encouraged to speak and are respectfully heard. Inclusion. All degrees of participation are welcomed and acknowledged, and collectivism. All engaged in and contribute to for the good of the group experience. Similarly, the 3 signature practices support the ABCs of effective learning by fostering autonomy, belonging, and competence of adult and child participants.
So we know the why behind using these signature practices. Now let's get into using them. Specifically, how to plan for integrating them either into your classroom or your time with adult learners. So we want to make sure that's really clear. You get to choose whichever one works for you, because these strategies work either way. So as we're starting our planning time, think about whether you're going to use it in your classroom or your time with adult learners. On this slide, you can see an image of the PAT document. PAT is an acronym for purpose, alignment, transparency, and target, and can be used as a tool to purposefully select and prepare to use the signature practices in the playbook. In the same way that we want our academic content to be intentional and purposeful, our SEL content should also be planned with intentionality. We have created an editable version of this document, so you can click on the link to access an editable version of the PAT document and adapt it to the playbook work that you're going to do today. And I think Tara's going to drop that in the chat for us, and it will force you to make a copy, so it's your own. Nobody else will see what information you put on your document today. All right, there's a couple of things we want you to consider as you are integrating the SEL practices into your learning or workspace. So these are the 4 key components that can guide or help you guide your planning process. The first one is prioritizing the task or topic by creating the conditions for the group will result in more effective learning and collaboration. So how much time is available? You obviously don't want to plan a gallery walk as an engaging activity if you have a short amount of time, because that's something that requires a little more time. So prioritizing the task, thinking about how much time is available. Number 2, aligning our purpose and having a clear idea of what's important is vital for selecting SEL practices that will support participants in achieving the goals of your engagement. So having a clear purpose, just like we do with our content lesson plans. The third one is keeping relationships in mind. How well your group knows each other is really important. How comfortable they are with one another and how many times you'll be meeting as a group are some of the factors that can help you determine the vulnerability level of your activity. And last, you want to empathize with your participants and read the room. Get an idea about the state of the group. This will help you select or create SEL practices that will match the emotional, physical, and intellectual needs of the participants. And these are obviously going to look very different if you're planning for adult learners versus your classroom of students. All right, so you now are going to plan one activity from one focus area. First, take a moment to consider your audience. Do you plan to use the tool with your students, or will you be focusing on using it with your staff, maybe in a staff meeting or an upcoming professional development at your school? Take some time to explore each of the 3 signature practices and decide if you would prefer to focus on a welcoming inclusion, an engagement strategy, or an optimistic closure. We're going to give you 5 minutes to explore the document and choose the area that you will focus on for today's planning. So this is an explore time here. We're going to drop the playbook into the chat again, just in case you haven't had a chance to look at it. And we're going to set the timer for 5 minutes. And at the end of 5 minutes, all your time now is just exploring. Explore the strategies in the welcoming inclusion, the engagement strategies, and the optimistic closure to decide which of those 3 you would like to plan for an upcoming PD or your classroom. If you'd like to turn your cameras off during this 5 minutes, please feel free to do so. We'll come back in 5 minutes.
The SEL team has used the PAT document to plan our session for today's summit. They're available for you to view using these links. There is an example for each of the signature practices: inclusive welcoming, engaging strategy, and the optimistic closure. So just take a look to see our planning process for today's session. You'll have 3 minutes to look at these documents, and they'll sort of give you an example for when you start to plan your own PAT document in a moment. So take 3 minutes and just go ahead and look through the examples we created for today's session. Okay, now that you've had some planning time, hopefully you found that really effective and you were able to kind of think through which of those you wanted to implement. We are going to give you a chance to discuss that with your peers. So you have that outline of your activity. We're going to let you go into breakout rooms for about 8 minutes to discuss what you planned and talk through the planning. So as you discuss, please share which SEL signature practice you chose and why you chose that practice, and how you plan to use the tool, and anything else that stood out to you. So again, kind of why you chose it, and then how you plan to use it. When we return, we'll have a few groups kind of share out a key takeaway or anything that they noticed. So 8 minutes to go discuss your plans with your peers. Hopefully you had an opportunity to utilize that PAT planning document and working with your group. I would love to hear just 2 people, whoever feels comfortable, just give us a quick synopsis, maybe a minute or less, about what you and your group discussed or what you're excited about or what you're planning on implement. So 2 people, minute or less if you could. Just go ahead.
So as part of what we are learning today, we focused on 3 components that can be embedded into any meeting or any lesson. Now, think about your next action step based on everything you learned today. And we just want you to take a few seconds to think about what you might do. Now, if you feel comfortable, we'd like to ask you to put that in the chat and just share out with the group one action step that you really want to try. And so on this final page, you're going to find resources that can assist you in implementing SEL into the classroom. And you can look through these resources on your own to continue building your content knowledge and practices in SEL. And we hope that you find these resources helpful. Here are the references that we utilize for this presentation in case you're curious. Have a wonderful day. Thank you, everybody.